Hello and welcome to the 13th episode of the Pirate Rugby Pod. And we are still trying to reach our next goal of 250 YouTube subscribers. So please hit subscribe if you haven't already and help us get there. If you leave us a comment, we always respond. So let us know what you think. You?
Don't forget, you can listen to the audio version of this pod on Apple and Spotify. If you drop us a review, it really helps us out. Also, we have a completely free Substack that you can sign up. The link will be in the description below, as well as our Twitter page. And you can get any kind of news or clips or stats that we share over there. So yeah, get into it, guys. Anyway, let's get straight into the show. Ender, and what was your rugby moment of the week?
I was going to say Mac Hansen, downing a pint, but that was probably way too basic. But what I did like actually when I did watch the Connacht game back, so for those of you who haven't seen it anyway, so Mac Hansen obviously, I think he actually picked up a knock, but he was basically at Connacht's home game, their first home URC game of the season. He was spotted on camera. He noticed he was on camera, so of course he downed his pint that he was enjoying. But then there was also another clip that went back to him a while later, and you could see him talking to some of the young fans in the stadium and also signing balls. So just thought that was a nice moment. It shows he still is a bit of a character, and he actually it was good to see him putting in the time for the kids who were at the game. What about you, Hugh?
Yeah, mine's my first moment of the week that was my moment for a bad reason, and it's when Owen Farrell kicks that long range drop goal in the second half against the Springboks, and I was like, oh god, it's happening, isn't it? They're going to win this, and I was like, no. And of course I was watching it on the ITV coverage, and they were losing their minds at another England drop goal in a World Cup and how amazing that was. And the Boks have been made so many errors up until that point, and then he kicks it to go 9 points ahead, and I'm like, I can't believe this is happening to me. And my life flashed before my eyes, and I just could see the week ahead of me of the whole England hype and things, and I just couldn't bear it. But then it didn't happen, so it was all happy in the end. But what I will remember from that weekend of semi-finals for years to come is the feeling that I felt when that drop goal went over, the feeling of despair.
I don't think you're an English fan.
No, I'm not. I'm open with my biases on this podcast. I'm open with what my biases are. My biases are not England.
Give the people what they want. So give your opinion. We like it. That's a good moment of the week. So moving on then to the best league is back. The URC was back this weekend. Had some cracking games. Do you want to take us through how the Welsh side's gone on?
Not particularly. So in the 20 years, this weekend just gone marks 20 years of regional rugby. And it is the first time that all four regions have lost on the opening day of the league. Not great. So in order from bad to worst, I guess Cardiff was least bad. Cardiff was playing at home to Benetton. Benetton, obviously, everyone's excited about the season. They made a lot of cool signings. They've capitalised on some of the English clubs going under and signed some of those players, like Jacob Umaga now plays for them, which begs the question, are there any English 10s left in England? I can't name any, because Joe Simmons from Exeter is now playing for Provence in the Pro D2, I believe. No, sorry, he's playing for Pau in the top 14. I'll check later. There. He's playing in France. Anyway, so Cardiff were winning the game in the first half. I think they were 19 points to 3 up, close to halftime, if not at halftime. And they went on to lose the game 23-22, which you could see like the Cardiff team sheet. For anyone who's not been following the Cardiff story, Cardiff really had significant financial troubles over the summer, and at one point they did not have enough players to form a squad with. They now have enough players to form a squad with, but only just. So there's players playing out of positions. There's academy kids in there. There's signings from other clubs. Again, English clubs that have gone bust have come over. And you when you saw the bench that they named, you were like, oh, okay. In the second half, they're going to struggle. And if you saw the bench from Benetton, it was their Italian internationals, some Argentinians as well in there. And they brought them on in the second half, and it made the difference. So, yeah, I don't think, all things considered, losing at home to Benetton for Cardiff isn't so bad when you appreciate where you expect Cardiff to be this season. But then you got the Dragons, who were also playing at home, were also significantly up. I think they were 17 points to 3 up at halftime in their game, or close to halftime in their game, against Edinburgh. Edinburgh, who didn't, I believe, have many of their Scottish internationals back. Ben Healy was back. That's one for the Munster fans. And again, they let it slip. Just poor decision making, poor moments on the pitch. It's funny, because in pre-season, Dragons got a lot of stick because in the pre-season warm-up game against the Ospreys, they kicked for goal to win the game. And of course, it was in pre-season, so everyone was like, "What are you doing?" And all the Dragons fans were like, "Well, we're practicing winning games because you don't win games very often, so we're practicing taking the 3. This is what we're going to do in games, and we're going to get some results on the board." And then they came to play against Edinburgh, and they needed to secure the result, and they kicked to the corner and they lost the line-out. So, yeah, it was very Dragonsy. Every Dragons fan and everyone who's ever watched the Dragons has seen that game 1,000 times. Losing a game they should have won, and they were in the lead for. So that was the second least bad. The Ospreys game, I'll save the Ospreys game because you're going to talk about that a bit as well, because it's obviously Connacht, which is your team, which means I get to talk about the Scarlets. Scarlets suffered their record defeat in the URC away at the Bulls. Now, the Bulls, I think, are going to be very, very good this season. They've been very active in the transfer market, and they've played very good rugby anyway. And I think did they get to the final in the first year? Was it them against the Stormers?
Yeah, it was them versus the Stormers. Yeah, and they've got Jake White. They've got an excellent coach.
Yeah, and they are an excellent team. But the Scarlets came out, and it was like we were unprepared. We were unprepared for the level that the Bulls were going to be at, and it was so disappointing. I spoke to our friend Vuyo. I messaged him and said, obviously, that this game is at altitude, and I said, what kind of impact does that have? And I wanted to know a bit more about the science of it and how difficult it is. And he said that he obviously has played in South Africa a lot, coached in South Africa, and he never played for the Bulls, but he's played against the Bulls a bunch of times. And he said, never got used to it. But a South African playing in South Africa never got used to playing at altitude, never managed to get a handle on the difference in the air that you get up there. So that's a mitigation, I suppose, but it's not an excuse for taking 60. It's not an excuse for taking 60. I've got to look up, because I'm doing the Scarlets pod tomorrow, I've got to look up how often we've taken 50 plus points in the last year, because it feels like every other week. I'm sure it's only 5 or 6 times, but even 5 or 6 times is too many. And like I say, the Scarlets had been in training for 13 weeks because this pre-season's been so long because of the delay for the World Cup. And how can you train for 13 weeks and then come out and not anticipate what kind of level you're supposed to be performing at? Because the Bulls looked like it was boys against men. And their speed, their intensity, their reaction time is just so far ahead of ours. And the thing that makes it extra difficult is Scarlets had a good team out. Like, we lost maybe 5 or 6 players to Wales, but those 5 or 6 players wouldn't have changed anything, I don't think. Maybe would have made things a little bit better. But arguably, the player that we missed most was Verfafita, and he's not Welsh, he's Tongan. Yeah, it was just disappointing, and there's no excuses. That's the thing for me. I think a few people are kind of shrugging their shoulders at this because there's a perception in Welsh rugby at the moment that all the regions are going to lose all of the time this year because of all of the issues in the background with the WRU, etc. And I wasn't necessarily expecting the Scarlets to go to the Stormers and win, but I wasn't expecting that. Like, the Stormers had the bonus point wrapped up after 24 minutes. It's just not good enough. Just not good enough. And we've got the Stormers next week. It's just about putting pride back in the jersey now for us, because it's not acceptable to go in and put in that level of performance. And like I say, a record defeat. And if you can't go harsh on a team after they've had a record defeat, when can you go harsh on them? So yeah, I ain't happy as a Welsh rugby fan. But let's go on to the next game then, mate. So Ospreys versus Connacht. And so just quickly from an Ospreys point of view, again, I thought the Ospreys team on paper was good enough to at least not be significantly down, 27 points or whatever it was, down after 30 minutes. A lot of Ospreys fans on Twitter, I'm surprised, have been quite positive about the performance because they came away with the try bonus. But again, I always say about the Ospreys, their team is good, their team sheet is good, the players they have access to are good, and they shouldn't, in my opinion, be seeing a late try bonus point over at Connacht as a positive result. And if you look at the next fixtures the Ospreys they've got 5 very winnable fixtures coming up next. So this is a big missed opportunity to get their season off to a positive start. But I don't know, mate. Am I being disrespectful to Connacht there? Should the Ospreys be seeing that 1 point as a good return?
I think after looking at the first half, Connacht at one stage were 27 up, and Connacht played really well. The set piece was really strong. Interestingly as well, I'm sure you know, it's like JJ Hanrahan, who returned I know he was playing for the Dragons last season. He got the nod ahead of Jack Carty, who was basically, he's captain last year, and I think I'm pretty sure he's going to be captain going forward this year as well. So that was a massive call, and he played pretty well. He was very good off the tee. So, to be honest, Connacht put in a really strong first half performance. They dominated. They were really fast in defence. Caelan Blade at scrum half, I think he scored at least 3 tries. He runs such good support lines. He's always there on the shoulder. He had a really good game. And the Ospreys just weren't at the races. They were still in the change rooms. But overall, I think it was that. That's why I really think that it was a good result for the Ospreys, because obviously they got a bollock in a half time and they came out and they put in a performance. They left with a pretty respectable score, because that wasn't a bad Connacht team by any stretch of the imagination. And just touching on Connacht, with young Col Ford playing at 12, he had such a good game. He had a really strong season last year as well. Tom Farrell, who earned his 100 cap for Connacht, played really well as well, and he was playing the 13 channel. And let's not forget that Bundy's still to come back. We still have Mac Hansen to come back, Finlay Beelum. Special shout out as well to Jack Ainger, former Leinster player, moved down to Connacht. He had a really, really strong game, putting some thumping hits. And as I said, the scrum was really strong. They didn't win every single scrum, but they won, I think it was potentially 6 out of 8. So that was really good to see. I don't know if you noticed as well, Connacht made a huge signing before this season as well. Santiago Cordero, the Argentinian, was signed, but unfortunately picked up a nasty knee injury in pre-season, so he's going to be out for quite a while, which is unfortunate.
I think I did see about that, yeah.
Yeah, so that was unfortunate. But look, it's a really good start to the season for Connacht. They played really well. They flung the ball around, and they were really good in defence. Line-out was strong. Now, things obviously didn't go their way in the second half, and they probably fell asleep a bit and let the Ospreys back into it. But I think it was a really strong start to the season. And also special shout out to their new signing, Joe Joyce, who came over from Bristol Bears. He won man of the match. He was excellent. He led the line out. I've heard really good things about him. So I think that was a really good positive as well. So really good start for Connacht. And yeah, if I were an Ospreys fan, I wouldn't be too underwhelmed. They came back and they put in a strong performance. But yeah, good start to the season for Connacht. And then, probably moving on to the other games then for the Irish teams. Munster, great start against the Sharks. They won at home and Thomond. One of the standouts from this game for me was Joey Carberry, who started at 10. We all know that he was dropped essentially at the end of last season, but he put in a really good performance. That was really good to see. And there was also a debut for their chief signing, centre Alex Nakavel. Nakavel, I think that's how you pronounce it. Apologies, Caelan, if you're listening. So yeah, a great start to the season for Munster. I really think they're going to build this year. They seem to have a really strong squad. Sharks as well had a pretty good team out. We all know how many Springboks they have. When they come back, I think they're going to be a different force. They've had a change at the top. But it was still a pretty good Sharks team.
When they have their Springboks back, they seem to kind of do worse than when they have their kind of normal team out sometimes. I don't know whether that's a cohesion thing, but I don't. For whatever reason, the Sharks B team is still pretty damn good.
Yeah. So I think they'll be good this season. Which a great start for Munster. Leinster, not so good. But let's be honest, it wasn't there. It looked like the third team. It wasn't, but yeah, they rested a lot of people, a lot of players. But it was close for most of the game until kind of Glasgow got away with it in the last 20 minutes. But Leinster were thereabouts for certainly the first half anyway. And let's not forget as well, Glasgow were unbeaten in the regular season last season at home. So this shouldn't be too surprising, especially if it wasn't Leinster's first team. And I also think just overall for the URC, this was a good result. Like,
Yeah, I agree.
it'd be so typical, especially we know there are a lot of URC fans or haters out there, I should say, and they'd only love to have seen a Leinster hockey score there against Glasgow. So I think that was good for the league overall. And let's not forget as well, Leinster going through a lot of change. Like Sexton's retired, Lancaster's gone to Racing 92, Nina Barr's coming in. You know, how long is it going to take him to implement his changes and his philosophy and everything? So I think Leinster will be a really interesting case this year. And then finally, Ulster, I don't know if you caught this game, it was a cracking game. They just about beat
Saw the
Zebre.
result.
Yeah, in Parma. Zebre were really good for that game. I think there were something like 3 or 4 tries in the first 20 minutes. It was an excellent game. But again, it probably would have been like I was listening to a pod earlier last week, and like people just seemed so dismissive of this game. But you would really question if these people are actually watching URC games year in year or week in week out, because this game was excellent and it was tight. And if you're paying attention to the league, you would have known that Zebre have recruited pretty well over the summer, and they've a pretty decent squad this year, so I think they'll do okay. So yeah, that rounds up the results for the Irish teams.
Yeah,
but
it's an interesting subplot to the Irish provinces this season, isn't it? Because you've got Carberry going well at Munster, and you've also got Jack Crowley there. Then you've got was Prendergast playing for Leinster?
He came on, yeah, he did get game time.
And then you've got the Burns there, and then whoever you might have at Connacht, maybe JJ Hanrahan isn't necessarily going to be pushing for an island spot, and then obviously the guys at Ulster as well. So there's places in the Ireland team to be won with some of the retirements that you've got. So it's going to be fascinating keeping an eye on, particularly Carberry for me, and seeing if he can get back to where he was, because he was the heir apparent at one point to Sexton, and then obviously really struggled with injuries. So that's something I'm going to be keeping an eye on as a plot for this season.
Yeah, and he's still a young player. He's got plenty more to give, so he could absolutely work his way back into form. So I think that's good to see. And it'd be remiss of us as well not to mention Jake Flannery as well up in Ulster, who is a former Ulster player. So hopefully he gets more game time this season as well, and he can really push on. But that's it probably from the Irish games in the URC. Any other standout games for you? I know we're not going to go through all games, so we don't have enough time, but any other game in particular stand out for you?
Yeah, I mean, we've covered most of them because between the Irish and the Welsh, we mostly played other people. But the one game that I do want to just give a nod to is Lions versus Stormers. So this was played at the Lions place, and it finished Lions 33, Stormers 35. So a hell of an attacking game on show. A few Springboks who didn't go to the World Cup on show. So Janschis was playing for the Stormers, I believe. Bloom & Cheese as well, who maybe he's not a Springbok, but might be familiar to Scarlets fans, formerly fullback for us. And yeah, so Lions lost the game by 2 points. Obviously, Stormers for the last couple of seasons, the strongest South African team in the URC, and Lions the least strong. But the Lions actually outscored the Stormers try-wise. It was 5 tries to 4. It's just the Stormers kicked a couple more penalties than the Lions and came out on top. But yeah, great advert for the league. Hopefully, the Lions have struggled financially and also struggled to attract a crowd. So hopefully things like this and efforts like this really boost their season. Yeah.
And then let's move on. I guess we can't, this is probably the biggest news story, especially of today and probably of this week, apart from the massive game we have going up in the weekend. But yeah, do you want to take us through the announcements from World Rugby today? I think we've got quite a bit to get through here, but I saw you were very active on Twitter. No surprise there. So let's talk. So we've got a World League confirmed. We've got a new Pacific Nations Cup, and we've got a 2014 World Cup confirmed. So we've a lot to get through. But just even in terms of the World League, this has been heavily criticized as far as I can see, especially in terms of our tier 2 friends who don't seem like they're going to get a chance now at the top table until 2029, 2020, 2030, I should say. Talk us through it. What's going on?
Okay, so the World League first. So there's tons to get through. For our audio listeners, I'm showing end of my notebook here, which is just a mess of words and notes and things. So it has been rumoured, 12 teams, Six Nations teams, Rugby Championship teams, and then officially 2 teams to be named. However, it's a pretty open secret that it's going to be Japan and Fiji. There has literally not been anyone else suggested for it. So it was passed by a very narrow margin. It needed 75% of the votes to pass, and I think it got one or two more votes than it actually needed. So it was still a majority voted in, people saying it was passed by a narrow margin, but still the vast majority of votes were cast in favour of it. Obviously, the way votes are distributed in World Rugby is very inequitable. So countries like New Zealand, England, France and things get more votes than a lot of other nations, and loads of tier 2 nations don't get a vote at all. Interestingly, one country that got a vote and did vote in favour of it was Georgia, which surprises a lot of people because Georgia aren't going to be, we don't think, part of it. So they have seemed to have voted for something that works against them. So I saw our friend Francisco tweet about that, and he was going to investigate that. So I'll keep an eye out and I'll retweet whatever he discovers. But yeah, so there's a few things. Below the headlines, there's a few extra details of this that need to be just pointed out. So some people seem to be confused about how this is going to be played, and some people seem to think that it's going to be a tournament that's held every now and again. It's not. So it's going to be every other year. So it's not going to be in Lions years or World Cup years. That's how it's working. And it's, like I said, including all of those teams are playing towards it. The Six Nations, my understanding is that the Six Nations and the Rugby Championship count towards it. And then you've got the summer international window, which would have been the summer tours that we're so used to. There'll be 3 games there that will count towards it. And then there will be 3 games in the autumn that will count towards it. So it's not that big of a change in the calendar. And then there will be a grand final to decide the full winner. So for some people who seem to think that, it'll be 6 games played in the tournament format or something. It's not. That's not what it is. There has been some other small rejigs to the calendar. So the Six Nations is going down from 7 weeks as it is now to 6. So at the moment it's got 2 fallow weeks. It's now going down to just having 1. That, I think, is going to be a bigger change than people realize. We've seen from the World Cup, and we've seen from the last couple of World Cups now, that having to play this many games back to back is a real struggle. We've seen Ireland struggle with it. We've seen maybe it's toll being taken on South Africa in the semi-final as well. And then we've seen England and New Zealand, who have had the big game first up and then subsequently quite easy games for the rest of their pools, really feel that advantage when they get to the semi-finals. So with this 5 games in 6 weeks in the Six Nations, I would now expect to see teams, especially the likes of France, putting out a B team in 1 game or maybe even 2 games. So I can see France putting out a B team against, say, Wales and Italy. And for me, that's a shame because it's just impossible for players, especially in certain positions, to play 5 elite level test matches in 6 weeks. It just doesn't work. And then the other thing that changed was there is the autumn test window, which was 3 weeks. So obviously, as you're aware, Ireland only play 3 tests, but countries like Wales play 4 tests in the autumn, and one of those falls outside the test window, and therefore we lose all of our foreign-based players. It is now officially 4 weeks, but I think that's probably to accommodate the grand final. However, I wouldn't be surprised if all of the nations scheduled a 4th test because test matches are money. On that subject, what this World League currently means, assuming that Fiji and Japan are going to be added to the Rugby Championship and assuming that that will go to a Six Nations style format of playing each other once, home or away, rather than the current Rugby Championship format of playing each other twice, unless you're New Zealand and Australia, we play each other 3 times. That would mean New Zealand and Australia losing between 2 and 3 test matches a year, which is obviously a big revenue loss. Now, the way that the Southern Hemisphere calendar works with Super Rugby, especially for New Zealand, who pick only New Zealand-based players, between the start of August, essentially, and the end of November or even the first week of December, New Zealand have basically carte blanche to organise as many test matches as they want. They can play one every week if they want because there's no clashes, and they have full access to all of their players. So I wouldn't be surprised to see New Zealand in particular still organising extra games outside this. Now, you would hope it would be against tier twos who aren't going to get to play them in the current format. New Zealand love a game in the USA, for example, so they might do that. You can also see potentially a game against Tonga or Samoa. They like to do every now and again. But we've also seen plenty of times in the past that they'll just organise an extra test against a tier one. Like, to give another example, Wales in the past, when they couldn't get a fourth Southern Hemisphere team for an autumn test, they just booked Scotland. So we played Scotland in the autumn. So there's no guarantee that they're going to play extra tier two teams. And just to clarify what's happening with tier two, some people seem to think that, World Rugby made a big statement, and Bill Beaumont made a big statement in the press release for all of this, that there is going to be more games for tier twos in the 2 years that aren't World League years. Here's why I call bullshit on that. One of those years is Lions year. And in the Lions years, the home nations at least all normally tour tier two nations anyway. So I know Ireland have toured USA and Canada quite a lot during Lions years. In the past, Wales have toured Fiji and Samoa and Tonga. Scotland, I know, have done that as well, and Scotland have toured South American teams as well. So I don't buy that counts as extra games. I can see World Rugby are trying to sell it as that. Also, bear in mind that New Zealand and South Africa, the last two Lions tours, played a warm-up game against the tier two nation ahead of the Lions tour. South Africa played Georgia, and New Zealand played, I want to say it was Samoa. Yeah, it was Samoa as a warm-up for the Lions. So that doesn't quite count. And then the other year is the World Cup year. So it will be the Six Nations, the World Cup warm-ups, and then the World Cup, where then World Rugby, I think, are counting the World Cup as extra tier two fixtures, which brings us on to the new 2014 World Cup. So you will see in the pop-out banner here, which I've learned how to do now, that the 2014 World Cup is something that we have debated in the past. We debated it with Francisco, and we weighed up the pros and cons. 2014 World Cup is now confirmed. So 6 pools of 4, a round of 16 is added. It's going to be the top 2 from each pool plus the 4 best third place teams. So in 4 of the pools, only the bottom team will go home. So that's how it's going to work. And the draw for the seedings of these pools is now going to be made in 2026. So that kind of allies a lot of the criticism that was leveled at this World Cup in terms of the draw. It's reduced from 7 weeks. Well, it's reduced from 8 weekends to 7 weekends now. World Rugby said that's because of player welfare, but that's a lie. It's actually because they've gotten rid of one of the pool games because there's now only 4 teams per pool. So that's kind of what's happening there. Like I said, one thing that we don't know is what the qualification format is for getting into this World Cup and how those 24 teams will be decided. So just to give people context, I've just got the world rankings up here. So currently, the teams, based on the world rankings, assuming the top 24 go, the teams that would be at the next World Cup that didn't go to this one would be USA, Spain, Canada, and Hong Kong. So I don't know how much people have been following Hong Kong rugby. They don't play very many tests, and the tests that they do play, they don't tend to do very well. Well, they said well enough to get 24th in the world, but even compared to the likes of Chile and I don't know, Kenya or someone like that, Hong Kong is not on people's radar. So that's the kind of level that we're looking at. For us, we've spoken about Brazil on this podcast a couple of times. I think Brazil might be a likely candidate to be one of the 24th teams. Netherlands is another country that people are getting excited about, so they're the ones to keep an eye out for. Any questions on any of that, mate, before I talk about the new Pacific Nations Cup?
No, I think you've explained it really well. Can you see I guess my question is, I think with a lot of these things, like the first thing I noticed on Twitter was that everybody was pissed off. Can you see World Rugby side? Can you see any kind of maybe positives that aren't kind of glaring to us, maybe that people are kind of just not seeing because they're so annoyed? Or is this overall just not a good move, do you think, for rugby in general?
I think it's positive for Fiji. I think they're going to get a lot out of it, and I think it's positive for Japan. I think they're going to get a lot out of it. I think there's a lot of hot air coming out of World Rugby. I think it's all to do with protecting the interests. I mean, follow the money. Who owns this? It's this new World League thing isn't being owned by World Rugby. It's owned by SANZAAR and the Six Nations. And when we're talking about the extra two teams being Japan and Fiji, are they going to be part owners, or are they going to join the Rugby Championship and therefore become part of SANZAAR? You know, follow the money, guys. What's going to happen here? If it was all for the good of World Rugby, it would be owned and run by World Rugby. It's not. It's owned and run by the Six Nations and SANZAAR, like I said. Promotion relegation is something that people have talked about. So promotion relegation isn't going to be started until 2030 at the earliest. That is not from 2030 there will be relegation. It's possibly maybe in 2030 we might start looking at relegation. And again, that might not be a straight up and down. It might be a playoff to get promoted and relegated. And if it's a two-leg playoff, home and away, those systems are rigged basically to support the team not going down. That's why they come up with solutions like that. And like I said, any bluster about more opportunities for tier 2 nations in the non-World League years, I don't buy. Bill Beaumont, in his quotes for all of this, is Bill Beaumont bullshit. It's the things he comes out with. Like, one of the things he said was in making more relevant and accessible games for fans. What a load of nonsense. Like, we can't talk about accessibility until we know the TV deal, obviously. And if it's all divided up, as we've talked about previously on this podcast, if it's all divided up between multiple broadcasters, it's not accessible. And if it's not on free to air, it's not accessible. So that doesn't do anything for fans. And then we talk about relevance. I don't see how a World League at this point is more relevant than the current fixtures that we've got. I don't see how a World League game is more relevant than, say, Ireland's historic Test series victory in New Zealand. So that's I kind of don't buy that. And it smacks of a guy who's either in an echo chamber and has no idea what the rugby community is saying about this, or he just doesn't care. Put it this way, they've put all of this out on the Tuesday before the World Cup final. So, like, in 2 days' time, all of the teams are going to be out for the final and the bronze playoff match, and the narrative will be changed. I don't think that's a coincidence. Yes, everybody was in Paris this week to do the vote, and all the journos around to receive the press briefing. They could have done it next week after the World Cup final. It could have been one of those things where we think it's happened, but the official announcement comes next week. No, they're getting it all out of the way now because they know there's going to be something else to talk about in a couple of days' time. So that's it from me. Anyway, new Pacific Nations Cup. So this is one that's obviously affecting a lot of our subscribers who are joining us from Fiji and around that part of the world. Bula, guys. So the new Pacific Nations Cup, essentially the headline is Canada and USA are added to the Pacific Nations Cup. So up until, this year, because it's been a fluctuating membership in the tournament for the last few seasons anyway. This season it was Japan, Fiji, Samoa, Tonga. From next year, this starting 2024, it's going to include Canada and USA. The final, there's going to be pool stages. So there's going to be a Pacific Island pool of Fiji, Samoa, and Tonga, and then there's going to be an other pool of Canada, USA, Japan, which on current form you'd assume Japan would absolutely walk. And then there'll be a grand final, and the grand final is going to alternate year on year between USA and Japan. So there will, currently as it stands, there will never be a grand final played in Fiji or Samoa or Tonga or Canada. It will be either USA or Japan, and that is part apparently of World Rugby strategy to grow the game in the USA, essentially. That's what the thinking behind that is. A couple of things. Some people, so Squidge Rugby tweeted, why is Uruguay and Chile not in it? Two things. So it's the Pacific Nations Cup. Uruguay doesn't have a Pacific coast. I'm sorry to be pedantic, but that's just a geographical fact. Chile obviously does. And then secondly, according to one journalist that I was interacting with on Twitter, apologies, I can't remember his name. If you search my replies, you'll see me speaking to him there. Apparently, Chile and Uruguay said that they didn't want to be in it because it's going to be played outside the current test match release windows, which you can see because, as I've said, Fiji and Japan are going to be in either the Rugby Championship or this new World League, which begs the question, when on earth is this Pacific Nations Cup going to be played? Because you'd say that Fiji and Japan don't have the space in the calendar to play it. And so the answer to that would either be Fiji and Japan would leave the Pacific Nations Cup at some point, or they would put B teams out in it, which obviously we don't particularly want to see and is not the level of competition that we want on our screens. So essentially, we're not a big fan of that either. I think I've covered pretty much all of that. It feels like I've been talking for an hour. I'm just checking all the rest of my notes.
Well, it was a big news story, need to be covered.
Yeah. I think that's it. I think that's covered everything. Oh, one last bit of good news. Women's rugby now has official test windows. So like men's rugby, I'll be honest, completely open and honest, I didn't realize that women's rugby didn't already have this. But apparently the release windows for players from clubs sides wasn't official, and it now is. So that's at least some progress. Again, women's rugby seems to be the only source of positive news in rugby union at the moment. So yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I think I've read everything on my page, mate.
Well, that's great, because I just wanted to kind of unrelated to that, but I suppose been very relevant to our pod and to all rugby fans, really. There was a very interesting article released by The Telegraph yesterday, just in relation to TNT Sports' next broadcast deal with Premiership Rugby. So if you remember, I did a tweet a couple of months ago now, and there are actually a crazy amount of broadcast deals that are coming to an end at the end of this current season. Like quickly running through the list here, like the URC has a deal in place with BBC Northern Ireland that expires end of this year. The other ones are a bit longer, but yeah, the Premiership ends this year, so that includes also the Premiership Rugby Cup, the Champions Cup, the Challenge Cup. We've got the top 14 rights. We don't know what's happening at the end of this season, and also the autumn internationals. International, we don't know what's happening, next year. So there are a lot of, like the broadcast space is going to be extremely interesting. Like I'm not sure what it's going to look like at the beginning of next season. Like maybe it'll be very similar. But the interesting piece in this article was just in relation to obviously the deal and the value of this next deal. So according to the Telegraph, I don't know if you know this, but the last 3-year deal was worth 110 million. So that works out at about 36 million a year. Now to put that in contrast, the top 14 deal is worth 113.6 million euro. So that's 454 million euro over 4 years. And also according to SportsPro and the URC, now it is hard to get an official stat on the URC's broadcast deal, but according to SportsPro, who are legitimate news outlet, it's worth roughly 55 million sterling, the URC. So I'd say that might be of a bit of a surprise to a lot of people, that the Premiership basically is has the worst broadcast deal out of the major 3 competitions in club rugby in the Northern Hemisphere. And that number, according to this article, is only going to drop, and for obvious reasons. It's now a 10-team league. Like we've seen 3 clubs obviously to go into administration. So apparently they are,
rumors of more.
Yeah, and like TNT Sports are quite eager to get this deal across the line. Allegedly, there were some murmurings that, obviously they weren't happy with the reduced number of games and whatnot, so they were potentially looking for a rebate, but they haven't gone down that route. But they're certainly going to get a reduction in the next 3-year deal or however long it's going to be. But it looks like it is going to be TNT Sports. It will be live from next season. We don't know how long it's going to be, but interestingly, it's going to be worth even less, which is not good news to a lot of those clubs. And so I just thought that was really important just to note. And it's part of this kind of overall landscape as well, in terms of we've touched on this before, but sports broadcast rights is like it's hit its peak. Like if you look at Serie A, they just signed their the last couple of days, they signed their recent domestic broadcast rights with DAZN and with Sky Italia. and they were looking for over 5 billion. They didn't get it. The French Soccer League, the League One, like they're not going to, they're looking for a crazy amount of money. They're not going to hit it. Canal Plus have pulled out. They said they're not even going to bother. Applying for it, bidding for it, I should say. So this is a theme across different sports leagues. It's not just rugby, but obviously English rugby in particular is going to be hit pretty hard because of those three clubs. So I just thought that was really important to note about this whole situation. And going through that list, there are I don't know, and obviously with the ORC, we do have Viaplay who are going to be in place for this season, and they do have another year on their contract after that. So we'll see what happens there. Maybe the ORC will be faced with a similar situation. Who knows? But I just thought that some of those figures, which are all from reliable sources as well, I'm not just pulling these numbers out of the air. So I thought that was very interesting.
It'd be interesting. Be interesting with the rumours of the English looking to join the URC as well, to see. That will maybe give us a clue about that. About if TNT only give them a couple of years, maybe suggests that they expect something significant to change.
Yeah, it'd be interesting. Who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? But certainly, that's and again, obviously, you're a soccer fan. You probably know that the Premier League bidding rights for the next cycle are also in motion at the moment. So apparently, TNT Sports are quite eager to get the rugby deal across the line. So there could be an announcement quite soon on that, to be honest. Because obviously their focus is going to be on the Premier League because it's worth a hell of a lot more money. Yeah, and it looks like also that Amazon are potentially not going to be broadcasting the Premier League. That's a story for a different day. So there could be a lot of change coming there. So it'd be interesting to watch. But it does sound like for your general fan, it just looks like it's going to be on TNT Sports again. But again, you are going to see clubs getting less money from TV rights, which is it's pretty damning. I think, especially when you look at the top four, the top 14 rights are crazy.
Yeah, so good. I don't know about you, mate. Maybe it's just getting older and getting a bit more wise to these things, but I feel like fans more than ever now are more aware of broadcasting rights and intricacies, and are just not willing to pay the money anymore. In fact, they're looking at the prices, particularly someone like Sky is charging, just going, no, I'll just not watch it. Don't know whether that's accurate or not.
Yeah, well, Sky have actually shown their viewing figures for a lot of sports this season have been really, really impressive. But there is a lot of pressure on sports rights at the moment in terms of costs, subscription fees, ad revenues are down. So and obviously we all know that inflation and there's so much going on in the economy that always has an effect on these broadcast deals. But I still think they maintain their value. I still think we obviously all pay too much, and it is driving a lot of people to piracy. But for me, as a massive rugby fan, I see the value in spending not a couple of quid, significant amount of money a month on sports. But it is driving people to piracy, which nobody wants to see, but some people have been forced. But you're dead right.
Pirate broadcasting. Who would encourage pirate broadcasting? Certainly not us.
Absolutely not. But be interesting to see what happens. Who knows what the broadcast landscape is going to look like next season. And also, we do have to, touch on Rugby Pass TV, which is great. So now we know that is there, hopefully. So for something like the Pacific Nations Cup, like you mentioned, and if there is no local broadcaster of Sky or one of the big players in the UK or Ireland don't pick it up, fans will have that option. If Rugby Pass go ahead and broadcast those games. So I think that's good, especially with the WX V now that we have. So women's 15 to new tournaments, obviously all those games are available for free, which is brilliant across even all of the games for 1, 2 and 3 of all of those competitions, because we know there are different tiers. So all of those I know in the UK it's slightly different, and because ITV are showing the English games and so are S4C showing the Welsh games, but in Ireland we can watch all of those games for free, so that's brilliant. So hopefully that's a sign of things to come. But that was it for me from the big broadcasting news, I guess, of the week. It's the first bit of broadcasting news we've had in quite some time. But that probably brings us then on to the second last part of our show, which is just going through the club rugby highlights, tier 2 highlights, whatever you want to call it. Do you want to take us through the first couple of results?
Yes, mate. So first results, obviously not club rugby, it's WXV, which you alluded to there. So Wales, so WXV 1, Tier 1 kicked off this weekend, just gone. Wales played quite well, but came up short against Canada, but it's an improvement compared to how we've been getting on against Canada in recent years. And to be honest, Wales have done very, very well to get to this level in the first place. So I think this first year in WXV for Wales, which is being played in New Zealand, the Tier 1 version, is all about learning and development for us, and hopefully maybe picking up a couple of wins. I don't know, maybe against Australia or someone like that potentially, but it's ridiculously difficult games. They're all the way through. Obviously, you got England, who are probably going to dominate. You got France, New Zealand in there as well, and Canada, who are a big force in the women's game. So yeah, there's that. England beat Australia, and also speaking of France and New Zealand, France shocks New Zealand in New Zealand 18-17, and I believe New Zealand picked up a red card in that game. So that's a bit of an unexpected result and really good. Obviously, New Zealand being the world champions, it's good to see a bit of an upset like that. It makes it exciting. And again, the only downside at the moment with the WXV is that because it's in New Zealand, it is on at silly o'clock in the morning for people in the UK. So it's a little bit hard to follow. WXV 2, you got Scotland beat USA, Italy beat South Africa, Japan beat Samoa. And then in WXV 3, Ireland beat Colombia quite comfortably. And the team that Ireland put 100 points on last week, Kazakhstan, beat Kenya. So this kind of suggests, mate, that potentially, I spoke with Kaylin last week and said that even the weakest women's Six Nations team is still stronger than almost any other women's team in the world at the moment. So it kind of suggests that World Rugby might have got this a bit wrong and Ireland shouldn't be in the third tier.
Yeah, I think so. And just to clarify, yeah, this is this was the second week of it. Yeah, but it isn't great to see those results, is it? But I guess for me, I just like seeing so many teams involved and so many teams broadcast. I think that can only be a good thing rather. And this is what we want for women's rugby. We want more games, we want more exposure, we want more people talking about it, and that's what we're trying to do here as well. Obviously, by talking about it, by going through the results. But yeah, that is going to be the downside. We are going to see some cricket scores, aren't we? Yeah. But I guess moving on then to the English Premiership. I couldn't believe that. Yeah, Sarries lost again to Bath. Sheedy was kicking the goals. Quins beat Exeter. I think that was a really tight game. Jared Evans kicking the goals, and then Bath are currently sitting top. With I think Bristol and Gloucester just below. So yeah, very strange. I think Sarries are bottom at the moment, which is not currently bottom. I thought I would ever say. But obviously they've gotten like a lot of players to come back. But
I think Leicester are second. Leicester are second bottom. So the Premiership is upside down at the moment.
Yeah. How about the Pro D? Did you see any of the results?
Yeah, so following a bit of the results, obviously most of these games are played on a Thursday night, so it's a few days ago now. But Vaughan are still top. They had a big win over Biarritz, who were all over the place this season. And then behind Vaughan, it's actually very tight with 8 teams covered by 5 points, and that's with 8 games in as well. So it's just everything to play for. And Grenoble are starting to really edge back into that conversation. They were obviously so close to going up last season in the access game, and then they got hit with the points deduction, but they're already starting to claw their way back from it. Sam Davis doing the business for them. And just to let you know as well, Stuart Olding is currently kicking all of the points for Agen. Agen or Brive, I can't remember. One of those. But Stuart Olding is doing things, is the important note to take. Welsh Prem, Llandovery beat RGC, who are really struggling this season. Ebervale beat Neath, who are also really, really struggling this season. So those two are still first and second, and the 2 East Wales clubs, Pontypool and Newport, are third and fourth. What about All Ireland League, mate? You've been keeping up to date with it?
A little bit, yeah. It seems that Lansdowne are on top. That's not overly surprising. Thankfully, as well, their game was broadcast for free on the IRFU's YouTube channel. So hopefully, we'll see more of that. In terms of also the Scottish Super Series, the Harriets, they've gone top with a win over Future 15, who were still winless, unfortunately. And they've game in hand over second placed Ayrshire. And then in the NPC, we had the final. So Taranaki were crowned the champions after beating Hawke's Bay. 22 tries in the first 10 minutes meant Hawke's Bay were always having an upper.
That's a typo from
22
me.
tries, yeah.
There's absolutely not 22 tries. So there's 2 tries.
2 tries.
2 tries.
Yeah, that sounds a bit more normal. Yeah.
Yeah, it's because they scored 22 points in total at the end of the game.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I mean, like the game was on at something like 5 minutes past 2 in the morning, Irish UK time. So yeah, didn't get a chance to see it. But yeah, look, it was an interesting one to cover, and I'm glad we did. That probably rounds up the results from this past weekend. Just really briefly touched on the TV guide. I won't go through everything. We'll have the guide out as usual, guys, on Thursday. But I did want to add, like, there are a hell of a lot more games on. Like, I think this past weekend there were something like 28 games on when you include all the women's games. But also the top 14 is back this weekend, so we'll have even more rugby for you, which is great. So you'll have Prem, you'll have URC, you'll have top 14, you'll have the WXV, excuse me, and yeah, you will also have, what else I covered? The World Cup final and the
World Cup final
playoff. The Super Series is on. Yeah, there's plenty more. So there's plenty of rugby to watch this weekend. So yeah, we'll have everything up for you on Thursday. Any final words from yourself?
You got a prediction for the World Cup final?
It's impossible. It's impossible. I can't. I know I said on Scoops Pod that it'll be New Zealand by 5, but I like seeing that come out from the Springboks, but then seeing the All Blacks come into such good form, I have no idea. We all did. Like, I remember pre-tournament, I was like, oh, like, we can't write off the All Blacks. And from an Irish perspective, I do want the All Blacks to win. But my heart wants the Springboks to win because I just love their players and their background. We all do. But I guess for Ireland's pride, I will go with the All Blacks by 5. What about you, mate?
Yeah, I think the All Blacks are going to win. I predict the All Blacks to win it before the tournament. Am I still with you, mate? My screen's just gone funny.
Yeah, you're still here, mate. All
okay.
Good.
So I think I predict the All Blacks to win, and I think it's going to be one of those ones where Bodie's going to be running one in from 50 meters in the last play, because I think South Africa's race is run from the fixtures that they've had and some of the attrition that they've had. I think All Blacks are just going to have that extra level of freshness in them that's going to make the difference.
Well, we can't wait, and it all kicks off Friday morning with the WXV. So, yeah, I think that's it from us, guys. Thanks a million again for tuning in. Any final words, Hugh?
Oh, from me, guys. Thank you.
I think Hugh's connection has just dropped, folks. So have a good one. Talk to you next week.